Exhaustive analysis of the narratives about the Mockingbird Project, from documented history to contemporary conspiracy theories. The inquiry into the conspiracy theories of Project Mockingbird addresses a topic of considerable ambiguity that lies at the intersection of historical facts and disinformation. A rigorous analysis of the available evidence reveals a crucial and often overlooked distinction, the one that exists between Project Mockingbird and Operation Mockingbird. The Mockingbird Project is a historically documented CIA surveillance operation that took place for a brief period in 1963. Its main objective was to identify the sources of leaked classified information to two journalists, demonstrating a control issue of the agency, not manipulation of the press. In contrast, Operation Mockingbird is a conspiracy narrative that describes an alleged massive CIA propaganda program believed to have begun in the early years of the Cold War. This narrative, which lacks official documentation, originated from revelations about the CIA's covert relationships with the press in the 1970s and was consolidated and named by unverified sources. The origin of the confusion lies in a blend of legitimate historical revelations, such as the findings of the Church Committee and Carl Bernstein's reports on the CIA's relationships with hundreds of journalists, and the popularization of a fictitious name from a book of controversial reputation. In the digital age, the narrative has become detached from its original context and has been co-opted by movements like QAnon, which use the term to discredit mainstream media as disseminators of fake news. In conclusion, while it is a documented fact that the CIA maintained covert and often problematic relationships with members of the U.S. press, there is no evidence supporting the existence of a massive and systematic propaganda program called Operation Mockingbird. Instead, the theory represents a case study of how justified public distrust can be exploited to construct narratives that distort historical reality. 1. Introduction: the duality of Mockingbird and the context of the report. The investigation of U.S. intelligence, particularly that of the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, has long been the subject of scrutiny and speculation. The term Mockingbird has emerged from this environment as a reference point for accusations of government control over the media. However, this concept is not monolithic. In fact, it encompasses two historically distinct entities that have merged in public perception. This report seeks to separate reality from fiction, unraveling the story of a CIA project that actually existed, from the narrative of a propaganda operation that has endured as a conspiracy theory. To achieve this objective, the analysis is based on a forensic review of documentary evidence, including declassified CIA memoranda, congressional reports, and investigative journalism from the time. A methodological approach has been adopted that clearly distinguishes between confirmed facts and unverified claims. By examining the context in which these narratives emerged, it is possible to better understand how a historical surveillance operation transformed into a myth of total media control, a confusion that has had profound implications for public trust in institutions and the press. 2. The historical Mockingbird Project, 1963. A CIA surveillance operation. The documented history of the term Mockingbird is found during a period of high tension during the Cold War. At that time, the CIA's concern was not the dissemination of propaganda, but the containment of leaks of high-level classified information. In early 1962, the agency watched with alarm as two journalists in Washington, D.C., Robert S. Allen and Paul J. Scott, regularly published information in their columns that appeared to come directly from classified intelligence reports. The data, though often garbled, was accurate enough to indicate that the journalists had access to sources within the government. 2.1 Origin of the project, information leaks and the context of the Cold War. The CIA, under security directives, was ordered in March 1962 to identify the sources of journalists. The objective was clear: to stop the hemorrhage of sensitive information. The solution proposed and approved by the Director of Central Intelligence was a 24-hour wiretapping operation. Contrary to what conspiracy theory would suggest, the CIA was not recruiting Allen and Scott, they were spying on them. This fact alone constitutes a direct argument against the narrative of Operation Mockingbird. A program designed to use journalists as conduits for propaganda would logically be incompatible with a surveillance operation to find their sources. The CIA's need to spy on these two men is, in fact, evidence of its inability to control them, undermining the central premise of the conspiracy theory. 2.2 Revelations through the family jewels, documents and findings. The existence of the Mockingbird Project was not made public immediately. It remained secret until an internal CIA memorandum from 1973, known as the Family Jewels, came to light. The document listed activities that, in the opinion of Security Director Howard J. Osborne, conflicted with the law, and explicitly mentioned the Mockingbird Project among them. The memorandum detailed that between March 12 and June 15, 1963, wiretaps were installed on the lines of the two journalists. The findings of the project were revealing. The monitors were surprised by the large amount of information that Paul Scott acquired in a single day, much of which was highly classified. The recordings revealed that the journalists had a wide range of sources, including members of Congress, and possibly the Speaker of the House. Despite the productivity of the surveillance in identifying a network of sources, the operation did not achieve its main goal. It was unable to identify the primary source within the CIA, known only as Mr. X. The disclosure of this document in the context of the investigations of the time, such as those of the Rockefeller Commission, brought to light a deeper issue. Although the Rockefeller Commission was informed of the illegal surveillance of journalists, it chose not to address it in its public report, opting instead to refer to domestic surveillance in general terms. This governmental omission, documented in the CIA's own files, created a perception of a cover-up. The lack of transparency regarding confirmed illegal activities left an information vacuum that conspiracy theories would later fill with more dramatic narratives, such as a mass propaganda program. The reluctance to admit a minor crime, illegal surveillance, contributed to the proliferation of a larger narrative, total media control, illustrating how the government's lack of honesty can fuel public distrust. 3. The origin of the conspiracy narrative. The Mockingbird, as a propaganda program. The narrative of a massive and systematic propaganda operation by the CIA, known as Operation Mockingbird, arose from a series of events and revelations in the 1970s, which created the perfect breeding ground for a conspiracy theory. 3.1 The revelations of the 70s. The Church Committee and the press. The starting point of this narrative was the Watergate scandal and the explosive revelations about CIA assassination attempts published by Seymour Hersh in the New York Times. These revelations led to the creation of the U.S. Senate Select Committee to study government operations with respect to intelligence activities, known as the Church Committee. The committee's investigation, which lasted 16 months and was based on 800 interviews with witnesses, uncovered a series of intelligence abuses, including the FBI's COINTELPRO and the mind control experiments of Project MKUltra. Among its findings, the Church Committee also confirmed that the CIA had maintained covert relationships with approximately 50 journalists or employees of U.S. media organizations. This fact is fundamental. It is not a conspiracy that the CIA had relationships with the press, it is a fact confirmed by a congressional investigation. The report, however, did not label these activities as a singular operation, nor did it characterize them as a propaganda program. 3.2 The exposition by Carl Bernstein, the 400 journalists and the dissemination of propaganda. In 1977, journalist Carl Bernstein, famous for his work on Watergate, delved into the findings of the Church Committee in a 25,000-word article for Rolling Stone magazine. Bernstein documented that more than 400 members of the American press had secretly worked for the CIA, including journalists from organizations such as the New York Times, CBS, and Time Inc. Their roles varied, from serving as eyes and ears abroad to carrying out more direct intelligence tasks. Bernstein's revelation, while explosive, did not claim that a massive and systematic program focused on the domestic manipulation of public opinion. His report primarily focused on intelligence gathering abroad, although he acknowledged that the fallout from these activities could reach news in the U.S. It is of utmost importance to note that Bernstein did not use the term Operation Mockingbird in his reporting. 3.3 The birth of the name Operation Mockingbird, Deborah Davis's book. The label that unified and popularized this narrative of an alleged propaganda program did not come from a government report or a prestigious investigative report. Its origin is attributed to Deborah Davis's unauthorized biography of Katharine Graham, the owner of the Washington Post, titled Catherine the Great. In her book, Davis claimed that the CIA had conducted an Operation Mockingbird to influence the media and that Frank Wisner, the head of the Office of Policy Coordination, had recruited Phil Graham from the Washington Post to lead the operation. Davis's book has been the subject of significant academic and journalistic criticism. Scholars like David P. Hadley have pointed out that Davis did not provide sources for her boldest claims and that neither the Church Committee nor any subsequent investigations confirmed the existence of an operation as she described it. The theory, as Davis presents it, does not seem to be grounded in reality. The myth of Operation Mockingbird is an amalgamation of a documented fact, CIA's undercover relationships with journalists, numerical exaggeration, the 400 from Bernstein, and a fictitious name and total control narrative provided by an unverified source. The conspiratorial narrative is not based on a documentary finding of a program called Operation Mockingbird, but rather on the assignment of this catchy name to a set of historical revelations, allowing the story to grow and spread independently of the original evidence. 4. The fusion of narratives and their proliferation in the digital era. The proliferation of the narrative of Operation Mockingbird is a symptom of a broader problem. The revelations in the 1970s about the abuses of intelligence agencies, from the illegal surveillance of American citizens to drug experiments like LSD, created an environment of profound public distrust in government institutions and, by extension, in the media that were perceived as part of a corrupt establishment. In this breeding ground of skepticism, the narrative of Operation Mockingbird flourished. 4.1 The breeding ground of distrust, from the Watergate scandal to the crisis of media credibility. The revelations from the Church Committee and Bernstein's reporting provided a factual basis for the distrust that was already forming. The fact that the CIA had indeed maintained secret relationships with journalists, a minor manipulation offense, made the idea of a more sinister and massive plan, a major offense of total control, plausible. The ambiguity of the revelations and the lack of specific names allowed the most extreme claims to adhere to the narrative, turning it into a persistent myth. The lack of a comprehensive government report addressing the surveillance of journalists, despite the Rockefeller Commission being aware of it, deepened this perception of cover-up and opacity. 4.2 The evolution of the theory. From propaganda to fake news and QAnon in the information age, the term Operation Mockingbird has undergone a metamorphosis. Its use has largely disconnected from its historical context of the Cold War and has been co-opted as a generic term to delegitimize all traditional media. Movements like QAnon have used Operation Mockingbird as a label for any media that does not conform to their narratives, labeling it as fake news. The theory has evolved from a critique of a supposed past operation to a rhetorical tool in the contemporary information war. An example of this evolution is the claim by public figures like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that Operation Mockingbird is alive and well today and is being used to brainwash Americans. This statement demonstrates how the myth has transformed, shifting from a historical accusation to a contemporary accusation of total mind control. The name evokes the specter of an alleged program from the past to validate the belief in total and ubiquitous media control in the present. 5. Conclusions and final analysis, separating reality from fiction. The detailed analysis of historical evidence shows that the distinction between Project Mockingbird and Operation Mockingbird is fundamental for a precise understanding of the topic. Project Mockingbird was a documented and confirmed surveillance operation. It existed in 1963 with the purpose of stopping leaks of classified information to 2 journalists. This fact, far from supporting the conspiracy theory of propaganda, logically contradicts it, since the surveillance of journalists is a sign of a lack of control over them. The existence of a covert relationship between the CIA and the press is a documented fact. The Church Committee and investigations by Carl Bernstein confirmed that the CIA had relationships with hundreds of journalists during the Cold War. However, these revelations did not refer to a systematic propaganda program. The name Operation Mockingbird and the narrative of a mass and systematic propaganda program are not documented. The theory is an amalgamation of real facts and a narrative unified by a fictional name, popularized by an academically discredited source. It is crucial to recognize that while the conspiracy theory lacks evidence, the CIA's history is not free from abuses. The revelations of the Church Committee regarding Project MKUltra, illegal domestic surveillance, and covert relationships with the media are historical facts that warranted public distrust and demonstrated the need for democratic oversight of the power of intelligence agencies. Senator Frank Church's claims about the ability to make tyranny total in America, and the need for oversight resonate with the importance of an independent press and an informed citizenry. Ultimately, the myth of Operation Mockingbird serves as a powerful reminder that misinformation is often built on a foundation of truth. By merging real facts with unfounded claims and a memorable name, the conspiracy narrative achieves a superficial plausibility. However, forensic analysis of the evidence reveals that while distrust in the relationship between power and the media is historically justified, the narrative of Operation Mockingbird as a mass propaganda program is a contemporary tool that distorts facts in the pursuit of total discrediting of the press. Separating reality from fiction does not exonerate institutions from their historical mistakes, but it prevents a myth from the past from being used to undermine the truth in the present.